This is like jazz. Anybody like jazz? Anybody like the saxophone? Okay, she's the sax. She's sexy, she's brilliant, she's the sax. And I'm gonna riff off of her. Because you already heard from me today, I'll just riff, okay?
Okay.
So in the prep, we kept talking about how this is this really important moment in the science of reading conversation where all these new people are coming to it, and that's wonderful and it's fantastic. But there are some ways in which we kind of keep having the same conversation, and a lot of things are moving on, including like the curriculum in our market. And so it's kind of felt like there's this undercurrent of the stuff people say in the DMs, right? Like the things that people are worried about that aren't necessarily getting the airtime in the public discourse. So because you all stayed so late, we're gonna talk about the stuff people are saying in the DMs right now, about the science of reading conversation. We're gonna do this. And all of my things, because I'm prone to standing on soapboxes, in part because I'm a little bit short, today it's the heels, that'll be my prop, my cosmetic height. But one of the things, all of the things that I will sort of have on my soapbox will be under the same umbrella, which is, it's the whole curriculum, y'all. It is not just the foundational skills curriculum or the K-2 curriculum, it is in fact the whole K-12, pre-K-12 actually, curriculum, and I want to kind of unpack some layers of that. But the easiest way to talk about the problem that we have, because we're not actually talking about the whole curriculum, is the phonics patch risk. And this is big and it's bad and it's happening all around the country. As the science of reading conversation blows up, and every time there's a new thing that hits, a new podcast from Emily or a new Everport's review of one of the most popular curriculum in America that rates it one of the 3 lowest. Every time that happens, my inbox blows up, largely with superintendents. And I hear from all these superintendents who have the same impression, that they just have to go solve the phonics problem. Because when things really bubble up to the highest layer, that's what's really breaking through to superintendents and school boards. And predictably what they're doing is they're going and they think that they can solve the problem with the phonics supplement and that their work is done. And there are 2 reasons, and by the way, I really like to sort of share and link to things that we don't have time, these are closing remarks, and I'm not gonna go deep into any of this. So I'm gonna try to share out some resources. These are 2 of my favorite pieces of writing that get into the problem that is most talked about around the phonics patch risk, which is real and a big one, which is that if you layer on the phonics supplement, but you still leave a core curriculum that has all kinds of cueing in it, you left a harmful thing and papered over it. And so that's a big bad one that I think Tiffany Peltier did a nice job of explaining in a blog that I linked there, where it's, you know, all those visuals that we know all too well with Skippy the Frog. If you've left Skippy the Frog, but you've put phonics on top of it, you still have a problem. And then of course, Emily's at a loss for words unpacks this problem beautifully. But the part of this that we aren't talking about is that if you put your phonics patch on, even if you put your phonics patch on and you chase your cueing out of the curriculum, you've still left a problem in every grade beyond grade 2. And you've left meaningful problems in beyond grade 2. The one that we most often don't talk about, so it's the one I'm gonna name, is that you've left a problem where you have children in grade levels K through 12, where you have children that are not exposed on a daily basis to text at their grade level, and nothing is catching those children up. And it's a massive problem. When we were preparing, and I was talking with Tracy about this part of the problem, she said, you know, the heartbreaking thing about this is that we have kids that reach a state assessment in grade 3 or 4, and it's the first time they've encountered a grade level text. And how, I mean, I get the chills just saying it out loud. That is a heartbreaking thing. We barely are talking about it. At least we're starting to talk about, thanks to Natalie and lots of us in the room, and Taria for bringing us together, the lack of intentional knowledge building, the over-focus on comprehension skills and strategies, the lack of writing that maps to reading and all of the ways that that helps reinforce the knowledge building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on about the other problems that we're leaving, but we can't stand by and let the science of reading movement turn into a phonics patch moment. Not gonna have it, not gonna have it. And this last one, and this is the thing that I would want like the people who spoke today to hear, I wrote this piece a few years ago about how level reading groups don't work, and the one thing that I would want anyone who's a leader in this space to know, because it's the thing we're not talking about, that's the most well-trafficked thing I've written by a factor of about 20. So this is actually, in my opinion, the gateway drug for teachers Teachers want to be exposing children to rich texts in their classrooms, and if we can give them the methods to do it, this is actually, I think, how we make the movement blow up, and it's the one we're not talking about. So I would encourage us to get with our gateway drug. I'm gonna move faster now, because there are lots of links to things you can read, but the curriculum landscape's evolving, and we're not. Our favorite lowest rated curriculum in America just got a phonics patch, and how easy is that going to make it for district leaders, all those superintendents that think the problem is just phonics? How easy is that going to make it for their leaders to go tell them that the problem is solved? So this is one point of evidence where if we don't get beyond talking about one pillar of the problem as our dominant point in the discourse, we're going to allow those curricula to remain rooted. The second part of this problem, there are multiple points of evidence in the last few weeks. If you follow Ann Shimke, the reporter in Colorado who's doing the best curriculum reporting, she just put out a piece that explains what has happened since the big science of reading push in Colorado. And guess which curricula are surging? Basals. The newer generation of basals. The California Reading Coalition just put out a report that says of the top 100 districts in California, overwhelmingly they're using basals. Basals first, balanced literacy curricula, Reading Workshop is the leader there. Number 2, actually, in the state of California in the 100 biggest districts. So we get so caught up in a couple of balanced literacy curricula that are gonna keep getting airtime in, thanks to Emily Hanford's work, and those are important, and they do have dominant market share nationally, but I think we're missing the fact that basals have always had large market share, and thanks to ed reports going out and calling them out as all red, they all did pretty much the same thing, which is add a bunch of stuff to get a better ed reports review, which they successfully did. But now they have everything but the kitchen sink. They consistently have more content than any teacher could teach in a year by a factor of 2 sometimes. So now they're just bloated. They solved the problem by bloating themselves, and almost no one's talking about that. Thankfully, the Curriculum Matters community, Sue Pimentel, Meredith Lieben, they are talking about it, so please check out those resources. But again, if we don't talk about this and start to center this in our conversation, we're gonna keep seeing something surge that is the next thing we can't chase out, that has roots. The good news is that there are all these high quality alternatives. I love the Knowledge Matters campaign, and I love the Curriculum Matters leaders for getting really precise in their work, including a wonderful webinar series in which educators explained all these new materials last year. I would point you to check that out, but I do think that we as a community, and our journalists especially, are really bad about talking about the good news in the space and the positive alternatives. Journalists are almost allergic to writing about materials because they think it makes them look promotional, so they're not gonna tell you, so we have to tell each other about these programs. And this is the part that is my biggest soapbox of the afternoon. And then I'm gonna hush and let Tracy get on her soapbox. This is the sexiest part of the science of reading conversation. There's a reason that the part about phonics is under a long-standing heading that is called the reading wars. Like, people battle about that. But you know why people brought in Reading Workshop after basals were super popular in the 90s? You know why it surged in F&P too? Because it had whole texts at the center of it. That's why teachers liked it. It brought in whole texts, and it treated teachers respectfully as if they could pick their own texts, and it put books in kids' hands. And it did it in some really flawed ways. But guess what all of these better curricula do now? They put text at the center of instruction, and they build around text sets in early grades, and in order to promote oral language development and knowledge building for pre-readers, there are all these read-alouds. Guess what Reading Workshop teachers love the bejesus out of in early grades? Like, the read-aloud is on the carpet, is sort of, and then a discussion of the text, or better yet, a Socratic seminar. Find me an ELA teacher, find me an elementary teacher that doesn't want that. And that's what you find in these better materials, and we're not talking about it. So we have to start talking about these virtues. And when I say that, I don't just say that from a soapbox that looks like Karen who rants a lot. I also say it as a former chief marketing officer who helped take 2 of these programs to market and knows a few things about what educators actually want from curriculum. So I kind of need our community to start talking about the things that teachers want to hear, not just what many believe is the medicine that people are trying to give them in the K2. And I do think that educators are the ambassadors we need for this. The last thing that I love about some of the resources I've pointed you to is that by design they center educator voices talking about this work. And as much as I love our voices, and I'm about to love hearing Tracy's voice on one of these topics, I think the most powerful panel today was hearing from actual educators in the work. And when it comes to K-12 education, what I've always said as a chief marketing officer is that there's really only thing you have to know about K-12 is that educators generally have very high trust of each other and trust almost no one else who doesn't work for a district. And as soon as you know that, you can actually you can build marketing campaigns around it, but you can also be thoughtful about how this movement helps reach those educators that it's not reaching yet, because it sounds like some journalist who wants me to do a thing, when actually it should sound like Kathleen Chaucer, who I think had to run, it should sound like Kathleen Chaucer wants to show you what her kids are doing. And I think the more we can make it sound like that, the more effective we can be. And with that, I've just done my saxophone.
It's beautiful. And so, Karen, I want to rip off of the important things that you shared. The first one that comes to me is an experience that was life-changing for me in a group of literacy leaders. Dr. Latanya Goffney, who's superintendent of Aldine ISD, Dr. Martha Salazar Zamora, who is a superintendent also in the Houston area, are my sisters and happen to be educators. They really want to do the right thing for children, and Dr. Goffney has an international conference online that is free once a year. And I had the chance to be the keynote speaker for the last one. And some of you have seen me say the same thing, maybe a slightly different way, but it's a broken record. I just have to keep playing until the right people hear the message and it really sticks. I think about some of the leaders I've spoken with who are leading districts nationally, and all they could hear was their own voice in their head, and the same thing that they've been doing over and over again, failing children being that broken record. And I thought, how do we work smarter? And so another literacy ally who's in San Antonio and I got together with Dr. Goffney and we said, how do we change this? How do we help superintendents understand how powerful they are as change agents? Help them find their voices as instructional leaders. Help them understand that this is the most important work they can scale to give children opportunity and access. I think about a superintendent in Mississippi who had a business invest in providing laboratory equipment and all kinds of things for STEAM and STEM for the children. His teachers struggled with their own academic English. And the majority of those kids could not read proficiently, so guess what? They could not access STEAM and STEM. So what we did was once a month, we gathered these superintendents and we talked about foundational skills, but we didn't stop there. And what I wanted to do was end with a very important voice, and that was Natalie Wexler's voice. As the culminating face-to-face experience after doing this virtual case study analysis, each of the superintendents having an opportunity to unpack a problem of practice around literacy. And what was very evident was they had a middle school problem and a high school problem in terms of just the foundational skills, but they also had a problem in terms of children performing beyond proficiency. So they were ready for a knowledge economy. So if we think about backloading and preparing children for a knowledge economy in an information age, we also have to ask ourselves this question. Are our assessments measuring literacy holistically? Are they also measuring class advantage based on zip code? And we talk about that background knowledge. We talk about the oral language acquisition of children. We've got to look at the whole picture. And Dr. Latanya Goffney, the light bulb that went on for her was your voice. And she's been totally transformed as an instructional leader of a district. So, how do we do this without being toxic in our village? We don't want to put poison in our own pond. And so I want to offer you 3 principles. The first one is be courageous enough to go to the person you have a different perspective from and have that conversation. Be brave. Take them on. Respect what they've done in that conversation. Acknowledge what they've done and be that bridge to what's more. Now, sometimes, just like that superintendent I told you about, they can be tone deaf. They may not be able to hear you. Find someone who can be that interpreter for you that individual trusts and respects, and bring them to the table. That's your second step. What I find is sometimes people go to the third step first and they blast the person through social media. They shame and they blame. Educators have had enough shaming and blaming. Those are not the models we need in our village. We need the models who are courageous enough to be vulnerable and take that one-on-one approach. Bring the shoulder partner in who's trusted and respected by both. And then if that doesn't work, sometimes we just have to speak truth to power. Then we may need to blast it. So I'm saying to you, hold me accountable for what I just said. If you hear me talking about somebody else and I haven't had a conversation with them, call me on it. If I have had that conversation and you trusted me with this, ask me to come alongside you. And then, this is chess, not checkers. If you've got to blast it, do it in a way that helps our village thrive. We do not want to cannibalize in our own village. Sam.
In this context, in this sector, who would you say is a shoulder partner to the movers and shakers in this space?
It depends. That's why it's so important to come to conferences like this, because you build those relationships and trust. And I never forget what Maya Angelou said. She said, when people show you who they are, believe it. It's by people's words. It's by their actions and deeds that you know who you're really dealing with. So you want to look for people who are operating from a place of integrity and vulnerability and honesty about what's best for children and educators. And when you see that fruit in your lives, you can trust that person. But if somebody is about themselves and their ego and you see that there's another agenda, don't go there.
I'll be a little bit more specific then. So as a parent advocate, my advocacy, a lot of ways, I've seen teachers and teachers unions as an adversary, just because they, as far as I'm concerned, look out for their own interests at the expense of everybody else's. Being here today helped me see that potentially, people equipped with what can help them be successful. I think the way Kareem said it is that people are vulnerable to their best selves.
Right.
So if you equip them
right.
with what can help them be successful, so they may not be mean-spirited adversary or, so what the question becomes, according to what you just said, meeting with the teachers. Okay, let's come listen. Now let's listen to where you're coming from. And right now it's very specific because they voted no to a resolution that would solve the problem for a lot of our kids. And so now it's a very adversarial space as far as I'm concerned. But before we get to that space, like you said, before we get to 3, let's go to 2. Let's go to 1. Let's have a meeting, just listen to your side. We're willing to do that, right? But then 2, who is the shoulder partner to the teachers that they respect and they will listen to, because the people that on our side of it are already upset. You know what I'm saying? And they're not inclined to be sensitive. Right? They're ready to go to, speak truth to power, blast and go, impose the rule, go get state legislators involved. Just go to war. Yeah. So is there a real shoulder partner to the teachers that we can work with?
I think one thing that has to be said in all of this, and then I'm interested in Tracy's thoughts, but the AFT has actually been one of the stronger leaders on consistently putting out information that aligns with everything that people in the room have said. And they've been good about being not just strong on their foundational skills messaging, but they also have published leaders like Dan Willingham talking about knowledge. There's nothing we said here today that the AFT hasn't been trying to get out to teachers for a lot of years, and they were completely, AFT and UFT, were both completely behind the Common Core changes when they came out. And, believe what you will about whether or not, standards may not be the best vehicle for getting change in this space. I think we've all learned that. But at the end of the day, they were the last effort to try to bring these changes into classrooms. So actually, if what you want is to bring your teachers' unions on side, the AFT magazine has some of the best content to be able to say.
That's what I was thinking, Sam. To invite them into a space and to celebrate that the union represents best practice sets a certain tone. And that we need to do this work with you and build upon the good messaging that's coming forth. That is not adversarial. Is it too late to have that conversation? I don't think so. It's when adult egos get in the way we can't be vulnerable and have the conversation. Maybe we didn't start off the way we intended to. Can we have a redo and have that conversation? It's about influencing from the middle. And often I see districts, I shouldn't say often, some districts do work to teachers instead of inviting people to the table. Places like Indiana, at the State Department level, I was never more proud of a leader than someone who was leading work in that State Department who said, we did this work to our EL parent community instead of with them. And now we want to redo this and invite them to the table. You never stand stronger and taller than when you're willing to acknowledge, I missed the mark. I want a second chance. And I want to really hear to your satisfaction what you have to say. That's what the gift of listening is. It's not just hearing, yeah, I heard you. It's listening so that we can repeat to that individual's satisfaction that we've heard them, and it's finding common ground. What can we agree to? Let's build on that as an anchor to the things that we need to work through together. It's being a principled influencer, and we need them desperately. I want to use this example. This is a rural district. How much time I have to head to the airport? No later than 5. I bet it's fine. Oh my Lord. Okay.
You're 10 minutes away. We're going to meet you there, Tracy.
I knew that was going to happen.
I will fly you to Texas.
Dude, it's Karen got me all fired up. This superintendent, Marianne Whitaker, former superintendent of the year in Texas, little bitty district, remembered how her mom used to teach kids to read. And she realized that guided reading wasn't working in her district. So she, as the chief literacy officer, took responsibility for that and came to Nye House to train her teachers. What makes me so proud is that she described how, instead of focusing on just phonics, they started focusing on enrichment for all. The children were maintaining their gains, and she realized we need to give them background knowledge. We need to give them experiences. We need to build that rich vocabulary. We need to partner with parents differently. So we've got to get, yes, the foundational things right, but then it's time to go into the greater things. For children to be able to be prepared for a knowledge economy, they've got to be able to not just read in the language of power, I said before, speak in the language of power, and present their ideas in the language of power, and write in the language of power. We cannot leave any piece of literacy on the table. So I would say challenge those within your realm of influence with powerful questions like Karen gave us today, and thoughts, so that we don't end up with the label of being, to quote one of my amazing literacy leaders I love, phonicators. We are not phonicators.
You'll never be the thing that Lucy Calkins wants to describe you as being.
Right. We are literacy champions. Thank you for the diehards who stayed for this conversation.